Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Riska Maharani Putri and I'm from PVEC class. And today I will present you about of the application of authentic assessment based on curriculum 2013 in teaching learning writing for second grade of junior high school students. This presentation is for seminar on ELT course. In this presentation, we will talk about four contents. The first is background of the problem. Second is identification of the problem. Third is theoretical basis, and the last is steps of discussion. Okay, first we will talk about the background of the problem. Background of the problem from this presentation is assessment is an ongoing process of measurement of students' behavior, acknowledgement, and performance during the class. It is often misunderstood as testing, while both assessment and testing are completely different. There are four types of assessment. First is assessment, second is classroom assessment, third is technique assessment, and the last is authentic assessment. Many teachers still could not apply the assessment in mostly class, especially in English. Mostly the teachers only rely on the test result and take a small part in student-teachers activity through the class. The application of assessment itself are not effective enough in Indonesia. The problem are on the teacher. They are mostly judging the students only by their test result. Okay, and the second is identification of the problem. Based on the background of the problem, I identified the problem of the study is how does the authentic assessment being applied based on curriculum 2013 in teaching learning writing for the second grade of junior high school students. We will talk about theoretical basis. In the theoretical basis, we will talk about two important things. First is about authentic assessment itself, and the second one is about writing. Authentic assessment. According to Wiggins, in 1990, explains that authentic assessment is the process of learning which directly examines students' performance on worthy intellectual tasks. Okay, so in Indonesia itself, authentic assessment is the requirement of curriculum. Curriculum 2013 requires teachers to use authentic assessment. An assessment should reflect students' real life and not only measure what students know, but also measure what students can do or perform. The curriculum obviously explains about the importance of authentic assessment. So, in Indonesia itself, the authentic assessment, it is not effective enough to apply it in some schools because the authentic assessment is really hard to do. I saw many teachers giving their opinion. Also, according to Brown, there are some types of authentic assessment such as performance assessment, portfolio assessment, self-assessment, journal, conference and interview, and teacher observation. Teacher can choose assessment based on themselves by considering the condition of students' real life. And the second one is about writing. According to Harmer in Marheini 2019, states that writing is important to be taught because of some reasons, such as writing reinforces the students to acquire language. The process of writing helps the students to learn as they go along, and writing is appropriate for reflective activity instead of face-to-face communication. In writing, students have to work hard to force their imagination. At the same time, they use their expression of thought, feeling, and etc. in written text. They also need to demonstrate language ability to facilitate communication in a proper written language. Writing is not only about arranging words into a sentence or linking the sentence into a paragraph and ordering a paragraph into a full text. It also requires grammatical and lexical knowledge, understanding and applying the grammatical knowledge into different contexts and purposes, and knowledge of topics that are going to be written. Douglas Brown 2000 said there are 5 significant components of writing, such as: first is content, vocabulary, organization, language use, and mechanics. First, we will talk about content. The content, it is the most important component to write, because if there is no content, you can write a text. There are 2 things which can be measured in connection with content. The first is the points that are presented and the formal signals given the reader to guide in understanding the topic. The points are presented means that points that are presented should be, and the formal signals given the reader means that the writer should give a formal signals in the text to guide the readers in understanding the topic of the text. And second is organization. It is absolutely important to write the text, because the process of organizing materials in writing involve coherence, order of importance, general specific, specific to general, chronological order, and spatial order pattern. The organization of materials will change the text, and it could be giving the reader the understanding of the text, or it will make the reader confused with the text. So the organization of the text is important. Third is vocabulary. Vocabulary, it is one of the language aspects dealing with the process of writing. So the writer should know a lot of vocabulary, because we have to write and using a lot of vocabularies to write a text. And the process of writing is the process when the writer always think about putting words into sentence and then putting sentence into paragraphs until they can create a piece of writing. So vocabulary holds the important components in writing. And the fourth is language use. In this component, it involves correct usage and point of grammar or structure. So grammar is one of the most important things in writing. It will affect the text if the grammar or the structure is not in order, and therefore it also has great influence in the quality of writing. And the last is mechanics. Mechanics of writing deals with capitalization, spelling, and punctuation. So in writing a text, we should pay attention to the mechanics itself, such as capitalization, spelling, and punctuation. It is not only capitalization, spelling, and punctuation. It could be the margin. Okay, after we talk about components of writing, now we will talk about stages of writing processes. According to Gardner and Johnson in Bin Abdul Aziz and Yusuf 2016, there are 8 stages of writing processes. The first is pre-writing. In pre-writing, students generate ideas for writing. They have to find the topic, and they need to learn more about the topic that they will write about. And the second is rough draft. In this step, the students get their ideas on paper. They write without concern for conventions. So the students need to write down the general thing about the topic that they will write about. And the third is reread. In this stage, students prove their own work by reading aloud and reading to see if it makes sense. So after they write down about the general facts about the topic that they have choose before, they need to read it for a while and trying to figure out if it makes sense sentence by sentence or not. The fourth is share with a peer revised. After they read their own work, they need to exchange it with their chairmate to ask for a suggestion and asking for opinion for the improvement for their text. And the fifth stages is revise. In these stages, after the students giving their work to their chairmate and they got the suggestions, they need to improve what the chairmate itself says and make it better. The next step is editing. In this step, it works together on editing for mechanics and spelling. They need to check their text if the mechanics, the language use, and organization or vocabulary itself is in the right place. The mechanics itself means such as spelling or punctuation, the use of punctuation, spelling, capitalization, or even the margins. After the editing stage, we need to move into the seventh stage, that is final draft. Final draft means students produce their final copy to discuss with the teacher and write a final draft of the text. So after they are make sure about the text that they have written, they need to discuss it with the teacher. Is there any revised or any suggestions again before they publish the text? And the last stage is publishing. Students publishes their written pieces by sending or giving their work to the teacher. So after they got revised and they got to check again on the content, organization, vocab, languages, or mechanism, they need to send it or giving their works to the teacher. Okay, so the next thing that we will discuss is the last one, about steps of discussion. There are two things that we will talk about. The first is the application of authentic assessments in writing, and the second is the advantages and the disadvantages of authentic assessment. Okay, so first, the application of authentic assessment. There are eight steps to apply the authentic assessment based on curriculum 2013. The first is make sure students know the criteria for good writing. We should give them the understanding about the criteria for good writing. We can expect students to produce good writing only if they understand what good writing is. Knowing the criteria for good writing will also help students evaluate on their work itself. And the second is let students help develop the criteria. If it is feasible in the classroom, have students got involved in determining the criteria they will use for evaluating a piece of writing. This will give students a sense of ownership and will help them to see why a given piece of writing does or does not meet the criteria. And the third is explain the students how their writing will be scored. We have to give them the understanding about how the teacher will be scoring their work and how to interpret the scores. Is it based on their contents or mechanism or organization and stuff? And the fourth is evaluate the writing process, not just the final product. Students will improve their writing as they improve their ability to complete each step in the process. An assessment of students' writing that includes review and discuss of each step will help students understand what works in their writing and why it works. And then the next step is provide opportunities for feedback. We have to give them feedback whenever possible. We have to give them feedback about their writing process when they are in the class. We need to check their improvement about the writing. So it will help them to understand their strength and weakness and identify which part or aspect of their writing need to be improved. And then the sixth stage is encourage self and peer assessment. So we have to encourage them to do the self-assessment and the peer assessment. So they need to understand what are their abilities. And the seventh is incorporate assessment into the instructional process. So we have to encourage the students to revise, to give them the feedback, what the text about, what their text about. So it will help them to find out which is good, which is right, or which is not. And the last stage is review the writing models. It means that after we assess them by their progress on the writing text, we need to review their writing to give them the final score of the assessment. And now we will talk about advantages and disadvantages of authentic assessment. First, we will talk about advantages. First is provides teachers with a true picture of how and where their students are in their learning. So the advantages of authentic assessment itself give us the benefit, give us the teacher a benefit, the true picture of how they do their work, or how far they understand in the class, in this course. And the second is provides students many alternatives or ways to demonstrate best what they have learned. The third is reveals and enriches the students' high-level cognitive skills. It means that, as what I mentioned before, that authentic assessment needs to give the students the understanding of self-assessment and peer assessment. So it gives them the understanding their level cognitive skills. And then we will talk about disadvantages of authentic assessment. The first is authentic assessment costs more than standardized tests, because authentic assessments need a lot of things that should be assessed, such as their behavior, their acknowledgement, and their performance. So the rubric for the assessments are different, and it will cost a lot more than standardized tests. The second is authentic assessment may be less reliable and valid than other forms of assessment. Yeah, it is not less reliable and valid because the teacher can be biased to the students that they liked because of their test result is higher than others. So after we discussed about the application of authentic assessment, we got the conclusion that the application of authentic assessment is not maximal enough in Indonesia, mostly because the teachers are still confused about how to apply the authentic assessment properly, and there is not enough insufficient cooperation between the teacher and counseling guidance. And the last is the suggestion. The teachers can try to apply the authentic assessment based on Curriculum 2013 by having insufficient cooperation with the counseling guidance. Teachers take an important role to understand students' development in learning writing. So that's all for the presentation, and see you again after the corona, and thank you.